Book 8, Part 1 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. The Aeneid by Publius Vergilius Maro. Translated by John Dryden. Book 8. Arcadian Allies, Part 1. When Turnus had assembled all his powers, his standard planted on Laurentium's towers, when now the springly trumpet from afar had given the signal of approaching war, had roused the neighing steeds to scour the fields, while the fierce riders clattered on their shields, trembling with rage the Latian youth prepare to join the allies and headlong rush to war. Fierce Ufens and Messapus led the crowd, with bold Mezentius, who blasphemed aloud. These through the country took their wasteful course, the fields to forage and to gather force. Then Venulus to Diomed they send, to beg his aid Ausonia to defend, declare the common danger, and inform the Grecian leader of the growing storm. Aeneas landed on the Latian coast, with banish'd gods, and with a baffled host, yet now aspir'd to conquest of the state, and claim'd a title from the gods and fate. What numerous nations in his quarrel came, and how they spread his formidable name; what he design'd, what mischief might arise, if fortune favour'd his first enterprise, was left for him to weigh, whose equal fears and common interest was involved in theirs. While Turnus and the allies thus urge the war, the Trojan, floating in a flood of care, beholds the tempest which his foes prepare. This way and that he turns his anxious mind, thinks and rejects the counsels he design'd, explores himself in vain in every part, and gives no rest to his distracted heart. So when the sun by day, or moon by night, strike on the polish'd brass their trembling light, the glitt'ring species here and there divide, and cast their dubious beams from side to side. Now on the walls, now on the pavement play, and to the ceiling flash the glaring day. It was night, and weary nature lull'd asleep the birds of air and fishes of the deep, and beasts and mortal men. The Trojan chief was laid on Tiber's bank, oppress'd with grief, and found in silent slumber late relief. Then thro' the shadows of the poplar wood arose the father of the Roman flood. An azure robe was o'er his body spread, a wreath of shady reeds adorn'd his head. Thus manifest to sight, the god appear'd, and with these pleasing words his sorrow cheer'd: "Undoubted offspring of ethereal race, O long expected in this promis'd place, Who thro' the foes hast borne thy banish'd gods, restored them to their hearths and old abodes, this is thy happy home, the clime where fate ordains thee to restore the Trojan state. Fear not, the war shall end in lasting peace, and all the rage of haughty Juno cease; and that this nightly vision may not seem th' effect of fancy, or an idle dream, a sow beneath an oak shall lie along, all white herself, and white her 30 young. When 30 rolling years have run their race, thy son Ascanius, on this empty space, shall build a royal town of lasting fame, which from this omen shall receive the name. Time shall approve the truth, for what remains, and how with sure success to crown thy pains. With patience next attend: a banish'd band, driven with Evander from th' Arcadian land, have planted here, and plac'd on high their walls. Their town the founder Pallanteum calls, deriv'd from Pallas, his great grandsire's name; but the fierce Latians old possession claim. With war infesting the new colony, these make thy friends, and on their aid rely. To thy free passage I submit my streams. Wake, son of Venus, from thy pleasing dreams; And, when the setting stars are lost in day, To Juno's pow'r thy just devotion pay. With sacrifice the wrathful queen appease; Her pride at length shall fall, her fury cease. When thou return'st victorious from the war, Perform thy vows to me with grateful care. The god am I, whose yellow water flows Around these fields; it fattens as it goes. Tiber my name among the rolling floods; Renown'd on earth, esteem'd among the gods. This is my certain seat; in times to come My waves shall wash the walls of mighty Rome." He said, and plung'd below. While yet he spoke, his dream Aeneas and his sleep forsook. He rose, and, looking up, beheld the skies With purple blushing, and the day arise. The water in his hollow palm he took From Tiber's flood, and thus the pow'rs bespoke: "Laurentian nymphs, by whom the streams are fed, And Father Tiber, in thy sacred bed, Receive Aeneas, and from danger keep Whatever fount, whatever wholly deep, Conceals thy wat'ry stores, where'er they rise, And, bubbling from below, salute the skies. Thou king of horned floods, whose plenteous urn Suffices fatness to the fruitful corn, For this thy kind compassion of our woes Shalt share my morning song and evening woes. But, oh, be present to thy people's aid, And firm the gracious promise thou hast made." Thus having said, to galleys from his stores With care he chooses, mans, and fits with oars. Now on the shore the fatal swine is found. Wondrous to tell, she lay along the ground, Her well-fed offspring at her udders hung, She white herself, and white her 30 young. Aeneas takes the mother and her brood, And all on Juno's altar are bestow'd. The following night, and the succeeding day, Propitious Tiber smooth'd his wat'ry way. He roll'd his river back, and pois'd he stood, A gentle swelling, and a peaceful flood. The Trojans mount their ships; they put from shore, Borne on the waves, and scarcely dip an oar. Shouts from the land give omen to their course, And the pitch'd vessels glide with easy force. The woods and waters wonder at the gleam Of shields, and painted ships that stem the stream. One summer's night and one whole day they pass Betwixt the greenwood shades, and cut the liquid glass. The fiery sun had finish'd half his race, Look'd back, and doubted in the middle space, When they from far beheld the rising tow'rs, The tops of sheds, and shepherds' lowly bow'rs, Thin as they stood, which then on homely clay Now rise in marble from the Roman sway. These cots, Evander's kingdom, mean and poor, The Trojan saw, and turn'd his ships to shore. 'Twas a solemn day. Th' Arcadian states, The king and prince, without the city gates, Then paid their offsprings in a sacred grove To Hercules, the warrior son of Jove. Thick clouds of rolling smoke involve the skies, And fat of entrails on his altar fries. But when they saw the ship that stemm'd the flood, And glitter'd thro' the covert of the wood, They rose with fear, and left th' unfinish'd feast, Till dauntless Pallas reassur'd the rest. To pay the rites, himself without delay A jav'lin seiz'd, and singly took his way. Then gain'd a rising ground, and call'd from far: "Resolve me, strangers, whence and what you are, Your business here, and bring you peace or war?" High on the stern Aeneas he stand, And held a branch of olive in his hand. While thus he spoke: "The Phrygians' arms you see, Expell'd from Troy, provok'd in Italy By Latian foes. with war unjustly made, at first affianced, then at last betray'd. This message bear: the Trojans and their chief Bring holy peace, and beg the king's relief. Struck with so great a name, and all on fire, The youth replies: "Whatever you require, your fame exacts; upon our shores descend, A welcome guest, and, what you wish, a friend." He said, and downward hasting to the strand, Embrac'd the stranger prince, and join'd his hand. Conducted to the grove, Aeneas broke The silence first, and thus the king bespoke: "Best of the Greeks, to whom, by fate's command, I bear these peaceful branches in my hand, undaunted I approach you, tho' I know Your birth is Grecian, and your land my foe. From Atreus thro' your ancient lineage came, And both the brother kings your kindred claim. Yet myself conscious worth your high renown, Your virtue thro' neither neighb'ring nations blown. Our fathers' mingled blood, Apollo's voice, Have led me hither, less my need than choice. Our founder Dardanus, as fame has sung, And Greeks acknowledge, from Electra sprung. Electra from the loins of Atlas came, Atlas, whose head sustains the starry frame. Your sire is Mercury, whom long before On cold Cylleni's top fair Maia bore. Maia the fair, on fame if we rely, Was Atlas' daughter, who sustains the sky. Thus from one common source our streams divide; Ours is the Trojan, yours th' Arcadian side. Rais'd by these hopes, I sent no news before, Nor ask'd your leave, nor did your faith implore, But come, without a pledge, my own ambassador: The same Rutulians, who with arms pursue The Trojan race, are equal foes to you. Our host expell'd, what farther force can stay The victor troops from universal sway? Then will they stretch their pow'r athwart the land, And either sea from side to side command. Receive our offer'd faith, and give us thine; Ours is a gen'rous and experienced line. We want no hearts nor bodies for the war; In council cautious, and in fields we dare." He said, and, while spoke, with piercing eyes Evander view'd the man with vast surprise, Pleas'd with his action, ravish'd with his face, Then answer'd briefly, with a royal grace: "O valiant leader of the Trojan line, In whom the features of thy father shine! How I recall Anchises! how I see His motions, mien, and all my friend in thee! Long tho' it be, 'tis fresh within my mind, When Priam to his sister's court design'd A welcome visit, with a friendly stay, And thro' th' Arcadian kingdom took his way. And then past a boy the callow down began To shade my chin, and call me first a man. I saw the shining train with vast delight, And Priam's goodly person pleas'd my sight. But great Anchises, far above the rest, With awful wonder fir'd my youthful breast. I long'd to join in friendship's holy bands, Our mutual hearts, and plight our mutual hands. I first accosted him; I sued, I sought, And with a loving force to Pheneus brought. He gave me, when at length constrain'd to go, A Lycian quiver, and a Gnossian bow, A vest embroider'd, glorious to behold, And 2 rich bridles, with their bits of gold, Which my son's coursers in obedience hold. The league you ask I offer as your right; And, when tomorrow's sun reveals the light, With swift supplies you shall be sent away. Now celebrate with us this solemn day, Whose holy rites admit no long delay. Honour our annual feast, and take your seat, With friendly welcome at a homely treat." Thus having said, the bowls, remov'd for fear, The youth replaced, and soon restor'd the cheer. On sods of turf he set the soldiers round. A maple throne, rais'd higher from the ground, receiv'd the Trojan chief; and o'er the bed a lion's shaggy hide for ornament they spread. The loaves were serv'd in canisters, the wine in bowls. The priest renew'd the rites divine. Broil'd entrails are their food, and beef's continued shine. But when the rage of hunger was repress'd, thus spoke Evander to his royal guest: "These rites, these altars, and this feast, O king, from no vain fears of superstition spring, or blind devotion, or from blinder chance, or heated zeal, or brutal ignorance; but sav'd from danger with a grateful sense. The labours of a god we recompense. See from afar yon rock that mates the sky, about whose feet such heaps of rubbish lie, such indigested ruin, bleak and bare. How desert now it stands, expos'd in air! It was once a robber's den, inclos'd around With living stone, and deep beneath the ground The monster Cacus, more than half a beast, This hold, impervious to the sun, possess'd. The pavement ever foul with human gore; Heads and their mangled members hung the door. Vulcan this plague begot, and, like his sire, Black clouds he belch'd, and flakes of livid fire. Time, long expected, eas'd us of our load, And brought the needful presence of a god. Th' avenging force of Hercules from Spain Arriv'd in triumph from Geiron slain. Thrice livid the giant, and thrice livid in vain. His prize the lowing herds Alcides drove Near Tiber's bank, to graze the shady grove. Allur'd with hope of plunder, and intent By force to rob, by fraud to circumvent, The brutal Cacus, as by chance they stray'd, 4 oxen thence, and 4 fair kine convey'd. And, lest the printed footsteps might be seen, He dragg'd 'em backwards to his rocky den. The tracks averse a lying notice gave, And led the searcher backward from the cave. Meantime the herdsman hero shifts his place, To find fresh pasture and untrodden grass. The beasts, who miss'd their mates, fill'd all around With bellowing, and the rocks restor'd the sound. One heifer, who had heard her love complain, Roar'd from the cave, and made the project vain. Alcides found the fraud; with rage he shook, And toss'd about his head his knotted oak. Swift as the wind's or Scythian arrow's flight, He clomb with eager haste the aerial height. Then first we saw the monster mend his pace, Fear his eyes, and paleness in his face. Confess'd the god's approach; trembling he springs, As terror had increas'd his feet with wings. Nor stay'd for stairs, but down the depth he threw His body; on his back the door he drew. The door, a rib of living rock, with pains. His father hew'd it out, and bound it with iron chains. He broke the heavy links; the mounting clos'd, And bars and levers to his foe oppos'd. The wretch had hardly made his dungeons fast, The fierce avenger came with bounding haste, Survey'd the mouth of the forbidden hold, And here and there his raging eyes he roll'd. He gnash'd his teeth, and thrice he compass'd round With winged speed the circuit of the ground. Thrice at the cavern's mouth he pull'd in vain, And, panting, thrice desisted from his pain. A pointed flinted rock, all bare and black, Grew gibbons from behind the mountain's back. Owls, ravens, all ill omens of the night, Here built their nests, and hither wing'd their flight. The leaning head hung, threat'ning, o'er the flood, And nodded to the left the hero stood, Adverse with planted feet, and from the right Tugg'd at the solid stone with all his might. Thus heav'd the fix'd foundation of the rock, Gave way; heav'n echoed at the rattling shock. Tumbling it chok'd the flood on either side, the banks leap backward, and the streams divide. The sky shrunk upward with unusual dread, and trembling Tiber divided beneath his bed. The court of Cacus stands reveal'd to sight, the cavern glares with new admitted light. So the pent vapors with rumbling sound heave from below, and rend the hollow ground. A sounding flaw succeeds, and from on high The gods with hate beheld the nether sky. The ghosts repine at violated night, and curse th' invading sun, and sicken at the sight. The graceless monster, caught in open day, inclos'd, and in despair to fly away, howls horrible from underneath, and fills His hollow palace with unmanly yells. The hero stands above, and from afar Plies him with darts and stones, and distant war. He from his nostrils' huge mouth expires Black clouds of smoke amidst his father's fires, Gath'ring with each repeated blast the night, To make uncertain aim and erring sight. The wrathful god then plunges from above, And where in thickest waves the sparkles drove, There lights, and wades thro' fumes, and gropes his way, Half singed, half stifled, till he grasps his prey. The monster spewing fruitless flames he found; He squeezed his throat, he writhed his neck around, And in a knot his crippled members bound. Then from their sockets tore his burning eyes; Roll'd on a heap the breathless robber lies. The doors, unbarr'd, receive the rushing day, And thoro' lights disclose the ravish'd prey. The bulls, redeem'd, breathe open air again; Next, by the feet they drag him from his den. The wond'ring neighbourhood, with glad surprise, Behold his shagged breast, his giant size, His mouth that flames no more, and his extinguish'd eyes. From that auspicious day, with rites divine, We worship at the hero's holy shrine. Potitius first ordain'd these annual vows; As priests we added the Pinarian house, Who rais'd this altar in the sacred shade, Where honours ever due for ever shall be paid. For these deserts, and this high virtue shown, We warlike youths your heads with garlands crown. Fill high the goblets with a sparkling flood, And with deep draughts invoke our common god." This said, a double wreath Evander twined, And poplars black and white his temples bind; Then brims his ample bowl with like design. The rest invoke the gods with sprinkled wine. Meantime the sun descended from the skies, And the bright evening star began to rise. And now the priests, Potitius at their head, In skins of beasts involv'd the long procession led, Held high the flaming tapers in their hands, As custom had prescribed their holy bands. Then with the second course the tables load, And with full chargers offer to the god. The Salii sing, and cense his altars round With Saban smoke, their heads with poplar bound. One choir of old, another of the young, To dance and bear the burthen of the song. The lay records the labours and the praise, And all th' immortal acts of Hercules. First, how the mighty babe, when swathed in bands, The serpent strangled with his infant hands. Then, as in years and matchless force he grew, Th' Oechalian walls and Trojan overthrew. Besides, 1,000 hazards they relate, Procur'd by Juno and Eurystheus' hate. Thy hands, unconquer'd hero, could subdue The cloud-born Centaurs and the monstrous crew; Nor thy resistless arms the bull withstood, Nor the roaring terror of the wood. The triple porter of the Stygian seat, With lolling tongue, lay fawning at thy feet, And, seiz'd with fear, forgot his mangled meat. Th' infernal waters tremble at thy sight. Thee, god, no face of danger could affright, No huge Typhoeus, nor th' unnumber'd snake. increased with hissing heads in Lerna's lake. Hail, Jove's undoubted son, an added grace To heav'n, and the great author of thy race! Receive the grateful off'rings which we pay, And smile propitious on thy solemn day." In numbers thus they sung above the rest. The den and death of Cacus crown the feast. The woods to hollow vales convey the sound, The vales to hills, and hills the notes rebound. The rites perform'd, the cheerful train retire. Betwixt young Pallas and his aged sire, The Trojan pass'd the city to survey, And pleasing talk beguil'd the tedious way. The stranger cast around his curious eyes, New objects viewing still with new surprise; With greedy joy enquires of various things, And acts and monuments of ancient kings. Then thus the founder of the Roman tow'rs: "These woods were first the seat of sylvan pow'rs, Of nymphs and fauns, and salvage men, who took Their birth from trunks of trees and stubborn oak. Nor laws they knew, nor manners, nor the care Of lab'ring oxen, or the shining share; Nor arts of gain, nor what they gain'd to spare. Their exercise, the chase, the running flood, Supplied their thirst; the trees supplied their food. Then Saturn came, who fled the pow'r of Jove, Robb'd of his realms, and banish'd from above. The men, dispers'd on hills, to towns he brought, And laws ordain'd, and civil customs taught. And Latium call'd the land, where safe he lay From his unduteous son, and his usurping sway. With his mild empire peace and plenty came, And hence the golden times did read their name. A more degenerate and discolour'd age Succeeded this, with avarice and rage. Th' Ausonians then, and bold Sicanians came, And Saturn's empire often chang'd the name. Then kings, gigantic Tybris, and the rest, With arbitrary sway the land oppress'd. For Tiber's flood was Albula before, Till from the tyrant's fate his name it bore. I last arriv'd, driv'n from my native home By fortune's pow'r, and fate's resistless doom. Long toss'd on seas, I sought this happy land, Warn'd by my mother nymph, and call'd by Heav'n's command. End of Book 8, Part 1. Read by Lars Rolander. His foes prepare this way, and that he turns his anxious mind, Thinks and rejects the counsels he design'd, Explores himself in vain in ev'ry part, And gives no rest to his distracted heart. So when the sun by day, or moon by night, Strike on the polish'd brass their trembling light, The glitt'ring species here and there divide, And cast their dubious beams from side to side. Now on the walls, now on the pavement play. Book 8, Part 1 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. The Aeneid by Publius Vergilius Maro. Translated by John Dryden. Book 8. Arcadian Allies. Part 1. Mezentius, who blasphemed aloud, these through the country took their wasteful course, The fields to forage, and to gather force. Then Venulus to Diomed they send, To beg his aid Ausonia to defend, Declare the common danger, and inform The Grecian leader of the growing storm. Aeneas landed on the Latian coast, With banish'd gods, and with a baffled host; Yet now aspir'd to conquest of the state, And claim'd a title from the gods and fate. What numerous nations in his quarrel came, and how they spread his formidable name, what he design'd, what mischief might arise, if fortune favour'd his first enterprise, was left for him to weigh, whose equal fears and common interest was involved in theirs. While Turnus and the allies thus urge the war, the Trojan, floating in a flood of care, beholds the tempest which. When Turnus had assembled all his pow'rs, his standard planted on Laurentium's tow'rs; when now the springly trumpet from afar had giv'n the signal of approaching war, had rous'd the neighing steeds to scour the fields, while the fierce riders clatter'd on their shields, trembling with rage, the Latian youths prepare to join the allies, and headlong rush to war. Fierce Ufens and Messapus led the crowd, with bold